Exciting, hey?
Well, might be. We'll
Casey
see.
doesn't like talking about
I don't like
himself.
talking about myself particularly, but I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go.
Okay.
So.
All right, so we have some questions, don't we? That we signed up. So we decided that we would have a series of questions we ask kind of all of our guests, so we can get a foundation of their knowledge and their history and blah, blah, blah. So, where and when did your equestrian life start?
So, when I was about 3, I'm a non-horsey family. So my mum was she was a dancer and then she was an academic. And my dad was a drummer in a rock band. So slightly different parentage. But yeah, the local riding school pulled in our driveway in the village that I grew up in Suffolk. And mum thought, wouldn't that be a nice idea if I took the kids for a pony ride? So she took me and my sister, and it wasn't really a riding school, it was more like a trekking centre. So we, you're right there. So we went riding. Mum just took us for a little lead rein, walk down the road and what have you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think she thought, well, we'll do a few riding lessons, we'll get bored, and then that'll be that. We didn't, especially me. So, I sort of fell in love with it, spent every weekend, holidays, whatever. And as I say, I probably didn't ride in an arena till I was about 12, I'd say.
Okay.
It was all just hacking out and thundering around the countryside, and
as it should be in Suffolk.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, we had a lovely time. Jumping straw bales and ditches and whatever else we did. Falling off a lot. Actually, we did quite a lot of falling off.
It's a good way to learn.
There was a lot of running up the hill after your pony after you'd fallen off it. So, and to be fair, even when I was a tiny dot, I know. Mum told me when I was a little kid, used to go out on the lead rein. I used to sort of get to the bottom of the hill and I'd fall asleep. So that was my thing. I couldn't really make it very far. It was meant to be like a half an hour walk, and I had to go like 10 minutes in, and that was it. I was dozing off. So
on the back of the pony.
On the back of the pony, yeah, yeah. So that would just kind of wake me up so I didn't fall off. I had a lot of fun there. Learned a lot, but not necessarily of formal riding, if you like.
Yeah.
But we did, our idea of no reins and no stirrups is basically who can gallop up a field with no reins or who can gallop up a field with no stirrups. So it was none of this going around on a circle on the lunge. No. Anyway, but and then from there I went and helped in a dealing yard and stud yard. Which again taught me an awful lot. That's where I learned how to back horses.
Can imagine.
We used to get a lot of young horses from Ireland and things, and mainly, a lot of them were little sort of cobby things. But but the one thing was that they had to be good to ride.
Yeah.
So we had to teach them how to let us ride them and not be sharp and not be silly and not be naughty, and that sort of anyone could get on.
Yeah.
So in the end, I've kind of transferred that even into the competition horses. That when I've done a lot of backing and starting horses now, and I still have the same philosophy at the end of the day. That first and foremost, you need to be able to get on and ride them, whether they're going to be a next Olympic champion or whether they're only ever going to ride down the road on a weekend is irrelevant. They still have to let you get on them, ride them, and and know how to behave.
Absolutely.
So do I need to come on further?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. So what did I do after that? Okay. Well, I've done a lot. I've worked a lot of places. I think when I was younger, I was very much. Didn't really matter what it was with horses. It was as long as horses. So in the dealing yard, obviously, as I say, I did a lot with young horses. I learned how to drive a horse because the old boy I worked for, he could drive. So every now and then we'd get a ride and drive in, and he'd say put a harness on and off we go. So off we went. Lovely. Driving and things. So there was lots of different things I learnt there, as well as things about even how to look after the grassland and how to mend the fences and how to do all kinds of other stuff that I sort of take for granted now, but a lot of people don't know how to mend a fence.
They're all the skill sets that owning horses, we have to kind of either learn or make it up as we go
along. Exactly. Yeah. I'll find someone that does know. And then I spent time working in different yards. I mean, when I was about 16 and 17, I did 2 summer seasons for Emily and Alec Lahore, who are up at Burnham Market Eventing Centre. Was working people there, which was, again, a learning curve. That was my first sort of working in a professional yard.
Right.
And, learning how to train event horses in that way. And obviously they had horses competing up to kind of, Burley and Babington and things. So, it taught me how to work hard. And, again, got to ride more capable horses. I by that time did have an event horse of my own. That I was trying to event, but so that was good education. But I've worked for. I did a bit with pointers when I was younger.
Okay.
Riding out. I did a bit with racing. Yeah, hunting. That was Master of Foxhound, so that was a lot of. Again, we used to back horses. We had some pointers as well. So, but then also just teaching them how to go hunting and how to behave, and and not to get be charging off, bucking everybody off.
So, how old were you when you started your own yard?
I had my first yard. I sort of ran a yard with somebody when I was only about 18, 19. Yeah, and
it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and I think I was a bit old before my time, really. So I ran a little yard in Suffolk, and again, I had horses in for schooling and backing. I did spend some time with John and Fiona Bowen in Suffolk. They took me in there, and that was good education. Learnt a lot there.
Yeah.
Fiona was an Olympic rider for the Netherlands, and John, he trained, he's trained a lot of people. He rode sort of advanced level and Grand Prix himself, and then has trained numerous professionals. So, that was again good education. In the end, most of the places I've been and the things I've done, I've kind of taken something away. I worked in a show jumping yard. They were all international jumpers. I was a stable rider. So, and they at the time had an Argentinian rider. Okay. That was their rider, and he was an interesting guy. He was batty as anything, but he was good fun, and again, pure show jumping, different discipline. So I think the main thing for me has always been trying to kind of expand your knowledge. If you, and even from a coaching perspective now, I find personally, I think it's easier for me to train someone on an ex-racehorse, having ridden racehorses.
Yeah, because you understand.
I kind of understand. Yeah. I understand why they're doing what they're doing, and when they behave in a certain way, I get it, because I know what they're like in training.
Yeah.
So I found things like that really useful. And as I say, the yard has always been a bit of a mixed yard. Dressage horses, eventers. A lot of some horses for sale for people, schooling horses, and in the end you sort of have what you need to keep the
bills paid
basically.
Absolutely.
So and I spent a lot of years doing that up until 2-3 years ago, when I decided it was all just too much.
So it wasn't really long before we met that you'd given up the yard?
No. I just decided I'd played around with different numbers. I'd had anything from, in the end I had 7 horses. I'd rented the rest of the yard out. I had 7 horses. One full-time girl that worked for me, Izzy, who was amazing. She was like my right hand, and we, and that worked well. I mean, I'd had times where I'd sort of had my barn, which was 14 boxes full, and more in other boxes around the corner, and like 20 odd horses.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And it's a lot. It's an awful lot. But it's getting a bit trapped in that thing of, you have a certain number of horses, so then you need a certain number of staff, and then you then, I need more horses really to get more staff, and you keep going and going.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a difficult thing to try and balance. And as much as, I enjoyed a lot of what I did find I was getting a bit to a point where basically, it was too much to fit everything in. Izzy had been with me for 6.5 years, and then she decided she was going to move on. So I kind of thought, do I think I can replace her? Because she's
when you find a good one, they're hard to replace.
Really hard to replace. And Izzy's great, and we're still great friends now. And also, did I want to? And it was actually, funny enough, another friend of mine who I'm hoping we're going to draft in to talk on here.
Well, that'd be cool.
Who he said to me about a German rider he was working for, who basically had her horses in full livery.
Okay.
And then would go and ride, and then it got me sort of thinking and thought, actually there's no reason I couldn't do that. So instead of actually having the responsibility of the yard and the staff and everything that goes with it, I mean there's a lot that goes with it, decided to scale back, ideally to 4 horses. I currently have 6, so that hasn't worked. One is your fault.
It's my fault, sorry.
To have less horses, have more time for them. The day-to-day running of the yard is cared for by the yard, where the horses are based. And, I can concentrate on riding and teaching.
We've kind of spoken about the frustrations of staff being a major issue, and I see that from yards that I visit as in my profession all the time. But there's also that element of work-life balance, isn't there? Like,
for sure.
You just touched on the fact that more horses you take in, the more staff you need, the more staff you need, the more expenses, so then you need the other horses just to make a living for yourself.
And I think there are a lot of riders out there who, if we're honest, they're not making a living, really. No, and they're absolutely not, and they are absolutely tied to what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And I think, I'm not sure it's that healthy. I think you need to be able to, in the end, we are, if you're doing this sport as your profession, we're all incredibly lucky, because all of us set out initially as, people that loved horses. So it was our hobby. And those of us that have been fortunate enough to turn our hobby into our career, I mean, there's not that many people that get to do that,
No.
So we're very fortunate in that sense. But you do have to then, I think, get to a point where you realise it is your career, and anybody in any career does need time away from it.
Absolutely.
And that you're not doing it all of the time. And I think that too many of us have this sort of inbuilt thing of, we have to work 7 days a week, and we have to keep going and keep going, and if we do, then we're going to be the best, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do the other. In the end, you just exhaust yourself and get to a point where you just think, oh, God, this is just too difficult. I mean, I sort of had to take a bit of a step back from it and look at it and think, I'd gone at kind of 100 miles an hour for 15 years, and then had kind of looked at it and felt that, if I was going to do anything well, I needed to have the time to do it. And I felt that I'm spreading myself too thin if I'm trying to run a yard with the backing horses, the schooling horses, the sales and what have you, plus dressage horses, plus event horses. And when I sat down and looked at the calendar for the eventing and thought what I'd need to do in order to get my horses out, I just thought, I can't do it. Because then I thinking I also need to teach, because if I didn't teach, I couldn't keep the money coming, so I couldn't afford it all. And, it was a bit of a vicious circle. So it was kind of a bit of a case of having to kind of stop and reset, really, and just start again. and think, right, okay, how can I do this differently?
I think that's really admirable and really brave, actually, because like you said, like many professionals that I come across have, and that doesn't seem to, I mean, there's a few professionals that have the exception to that, but most, like you say, riders, trainers, that are working in, and even grooms to that level, they get stuck in that, you know, it's not a high pay, there's not massive profits. People look at it and think, oh, it's a high turnover business, but it's never a high profit business. So then you do get stuck, like you say, trapped almost in that kind of, what I think the HMR you call them lifestyle businesses.
Oh, right, yeah. Well,
where there isn't the great deal of profit margins. You're just basically breaking in all the time.
If you break even, then you can pay for your life.
Absolutely.
But I think, I mean, personally, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it at different times throughout this programs and things, but I think there are a lot of people who, I've lost my trail of thought now.
I was saying it's brave. It's brave to make that big step out.
Yeah. But I think people get stuck in thinking they have to do it in a certain way, and that they don't deserve to be paid for what they're doing. You know, they're not, well, not that they don't deserve it, but that, you know, it's almost because it's their hobby that they've then made their job and they're being paid to do their hobby. It's like you feel bad for saying, but I need to earn a living. The same way that, you know, the grooms need to earn a living.
Absolutely.
You know, everyone needs to earn a living. Life is expensive nowadays. And when you get into the realms of having mortgages and, you know, cars and dogs and responsibilities.
Absolutely.
Adult life. It's easy when you're the working pupil and you're earning absolutely nothing, but you've got a roof over your head and you've got your horses and, you know, you have a lot of fun, and that's great when you're young. And then you get older and you realise actually there's more to it. Yes, indeed.
Okay, and so you focusing more professionally as for your career and your riding is dressage orientated. Who are you training with?
So I train with Carl Hester, who I'm actually going to see next week.
Okay, cool.
And then
you're going to get us some footage, right?
Yeah, I'll try. And then also started training with Andrew Gould a bit as well.
Okay.
Trained with Carl for quite a lot of years now, I mean, I go down every couple of months, and it's a long way from Essex to Gloucestershire.
It is.
But I go for 2 days. I usually take 2 horses, and you know, it's worth the trip.
If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
So, work smarter, not harder. I think
that's really good.
Sums it up.
Yeah.
I think now it's quite easy for me to look at how I've set up my business and my career and think, you know, that's a sensible way to do things. If I'd known that way back when. But equally, I think I didn't have the client base as a coach. So obviously I'm sort of obviously relying a lot on my coaching now. And I wouldn't have had the experience to coach. I mean, I didn't coach for quite a long time because I didn't feel as though I had enough knowledge to be able to help somebody else. Whether I could do it or not, I didn't feel I had the knowledge to
doing and teaching are two
different things. So, you know, that is one aspect, but I definitely think I would try to be a bit more business minded about a yard.
Absolutely.
Because I think we're all a little guilty of, you know, running our yards and not really knowing what's going on the business side.
But I think it fits into what you just said about it's something we love. It's our passion. It's our hobby that we then turn into a profession, and it's very hard. And there isn't really people out there advising on
no, exactly
how to set this up. And if there is people advising, they don't understand our industry, you know, because any other, probably most, and I have been told this by numerous business owners, they look at this and they go, well, where's the profits? Why are you doing it?
Yeah. And I've been told that. I mean, you know, I've had plenty of clients whose, you know, partners are something in, you know, in business, and they say, you know, if you came to me with this business model, I'd say, what on earth are you doing? And it's true. You know, But I think as much as, yes, you're not doing it for the money, unfortunately, if you're going to do horses as a job, you do still have to earn money.
Absolutely.
Somehow.
And I think that's something, especially in today's environment, that the commercial aspect is also being frowned upon more in the horse world.
Yes, I think there is a lot of... the kind of sayings like, in my day it wasn't so expensive, and it didn't cost that much when I was doing this and I was doing that, and you get that from some owners, can be a little bit like that. Both, I think, private horse owners who have their horse in a livery yard and they grumble about how much full livery is. And then, also owners that have competition horses, because they say, in my day it was X amount. And, a lot of people that own horses are former riders, and I think if someone actually sat them down and broke it down for them, what everything costs. I mean, some of the poor livery yards, so many livery yards are closing.
Absolutely. All over the place in Essex.
And in the end, my take a little bit with what I've done is I would rather support the livery yard that keeps them open and running. I'm happy to pay a decent livery. If the horses are done well and they're looked after properly, I'm still overseeing them. It's sort of the best of both worlds, really. It keeps their yard going, and it means that I'm not the one that's getting the phone call on a Sunday morning when somebody calls in sick. So it kind of works. But I do think people as a whole need to realise how expensive everything is. And
absolutely,
and staff need to be paid.
Absolutely.
You can't expect people to come and, yes, they may love horses and they may want to work with horses, which is great, but there's only so long you can love working with horses and
well, again, everybody has responsibilities, and I think that people maybe haven't valued somebody that mucks out your horse in the past because it's something that they can do in 10 minutes, but they don't understand that person's then got to do 10 others, and as well as the other jobs and maintaining the yard. But there also has been this element of a lack of understanding that there probably isn't many manual labour skill set jobs out there outside of the horse world that are earning very often just, if you're lucky, minimum wage.
Nowadays, if you work, from what I understand, if you work on the roads for the council, repairing the roads and you get paid a lot of money. Absolutely. That's why people do it. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but you get paid well. And in the end, you've got to give people an incentive and to be sort of fairly, blunt about it. A lot of people that go into the horse industry, especially if they're thinking, I'm going to become a rider, some of them are good enough, and they can make it as a rider. They don't stay in the yards as grooms very long. They are too good. They will go on and they'll become riders. But then there is a lot of people who they're not quite going to make a rider. They might ride well, but they're not quite going to be able to, or maybe they're not competitive enough, or maybe they don't have the right backing, or whatever it is.
Maybe they just don't want it
Maybe they don't want to. Some people aren't competitive at all. The grooms, I think, a lot of the time need incentive if they're going to work in a yard. I think if they're not quite going to be able to have their own yard or do their own thing, or become a rider, then they need to, A, get some job satisfaction, not just be given all crap jobs all the time, and B, you've got to pay them well enough, because otherwise, they could have a horse as a hobby and muck out one horse instead of 10 horses and do a job that earns them a better wage. So I think there's definitely there could be a little bit of a shake up in the old way we think in the horse world.
I think changes are afoot. So I guess that leads us on to the next question of, what do you love about the horse industry or the horse world, and what maybe don't you love quite so much?
I would say I love the on the main, I love the lifestyle. I think, horses are they're lovely animals to work with.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that kind of bond with a horse, then, I think people don't get that unless they
experience it
really. But there is, I love going and riding my horses, and I'm quite happy, on my own riding away, and I enjoy it, so I enjoy being around the horses. I always have done. So I think that is a real that's the lovely part about it, is the horses, really. Being out there in the summer and with the sun shining, and winter's
so you're
not
more of a
quite
horse person than a person.
So I often prefer horses. I think I get on with horses better than people.
They don't talk back.
No, they don't. But they can kick you in the head, so that's not ideal.
True.
So but still, we try and avoid that.
Yeah.
And I would say what I don't like is probably a little bit that sometimes the mentality in the sport or in the industry of there's quite a lot of narrow-mindedness. There's quite a lot of there can be a lot of people not being that encouraging and wanting to see you fail rather than succeed.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Which I think is sad. People could be a bit more sportsmanlike, because in the end we all have crap days. To be fair, most people have bad days more than they have good days. When it comes to shows and getting everything to come together all on the same day. Or just looking after them, exactly. There's a lot of days where you get your feet stamped on and you get squashed, and then you fall over in the mud, and then you're kind of thinking, oh God, what am I doing this for?
Or you've been training so hard for a certain competition, and then you turn up and your horse is hopping late.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's always a good one. But yeah, so I think people could be a bit more encouraging.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And accepting as well, and accepting that everyone has their way. There's not necessarily any right way. Everyone thinks their way is the best way.
Absolutely.
But there are other ways of doing things. You can still learn things from other people and other people's ways and methods and things. And
well, I think that fits in nicely what we said in the first episode, wasn't it? Is that we were talking about how we don't want to tell people what's the right way to do things or how they should be doing it.
Absolutely.
But, I think that the best horsemen are those that have realised that different situations need different ways of dealing with them.
Approaches,
yeah, absolutely. So there isn't necessarily one right way.
No, and the thing is, there is no fixed way of doing anything with horses, and that's part of it. Is I think you've got to be very adaptable because you can't just. Reading a book with the theory of what you're meant to do is all good and well, but actually in practice, not always the case. I
wonder if that's part of the reason why some people, why we and everybody gets probably quite frustrated. We're kind of brought up in school to know that maths equations have one answer and science equations have one answer, and actually then we go into the horse world and we go, well, what's the answer? Well, there isn't an answer.
Yeah, well, and sometimes there isn't an answer, which is very frustrating. And sometimes the answer, it can change, and in the end, the answers on a lot of things in the horse world, especially when you're talking veterinary medicine and things, the answers have changed a lot. But then that's no different to science, the answers that you learn about that are supposedly fact, they're fact until somebody proves otherwise. So there are cases with the horse industry where I think horses aren't we assume that's the answer because it always has been the answer until someone comes along and goes might not be the answer.
What about this?
What about this? Have you thought about it like that?
Okay.
So I definitely think you've got to stay open-minded with horses. If you're not open-minded, it's not going to work. You have to be prepared to, and you have to be prepared to question yourself as well. And I think that's the thing with a lot of competitive riders, whether they sort of admit to it or not. I would bet a lot of professional riders, they question themselves constantly about are they training a horse in the best way? Is that the right thing to do? Does it need this routine? Does it need that routine? Does it need, does it like this saddle? Does it like, whatever, this way of warming up or whatever, this bit, you're constantly questioning about, what is going to be getting the best from that horse, or I think you should be,
Well, I was just about to say, I think that's what makes a great rider trainer, because you have to be questioning those things all the time and just kind of going, okay, well, that didn't work, what do we try next time? Or what can I do with this horse that's different with that horse? And
and that becomes easier the more you are working with horses and the more experience you have.
Experience,
and
exactly.
Unfortunately, it is one of these industries where the older you get, the better you get at it, because it's experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can be a very talented young rider, but you just need another 20 years under your belt.
Absolutely.
I think having experience is really is the key to horses, and I think I probably knew that when I was young, which is why I did so many different aspects of it, because I kind of think, well, the more knowledge you've got, I was like a sponge when I was young, I just wanted to learn.
You still are
anything.
now, come on.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I still,
we all want to still learn.
Yeah.
How do you think the horse world has changed since you started?
I think that we are a lot more knowledgeable now. There's been so much research done now into all aspects of horses, and as well, I think we are a lot more knowledgeable about training methods and how to train horses to do all sorts of things. So I think that's changed a lot. I think possibly not for the better. I mean, I sort of remember when I was younger, the horse world was, everyone would go down to the local show. I mean, when I first competed, my first experience of competing was with my pony, and I used to hack it, God knows how many miles, to the local, local show that was in a park, and it was this massive field with sheep roaming around in it. And we went to the show for the day, and I did assorted classes, and we did. It was a day out, and then rode the poor pony home again. I mean, nowadays, that poor pony was probably exhausted by the end of the day, but it was. I think there was a lot more people did that sort of thing, and I think that's a really good grounding into the sport, especially competitive sport. I think it's a little bit sad that people become very niche early on. I mean, kids in pony club nowadays, they're kind of on a dressage pony or a jumping pony, or they've already chosen which discipline they want to do, and they're like 10 years old, and I think you can want to do a discipline. I mean, I remember being 8 years old, and kind of mum used to take us to it was Equus Park horse trials in Suffolk, which I mean, I didn't even know what it was because I was a kid, but I loved it, and I used to sit there with my eyes wide open, on the strings. I used to sit holding the strings with the horses galloping by. I was like, this is amazing. I was like, and so I knew I wanted to do that, whatever it was. I knew I wanted to do it. I just didn't know what it was. But I think I still wanted to do other things. I still did other things. I didn't just go, well, now I want to be an event rider and that's all I'm going to do, and I think it's a bit of a shame really that kids don't, and even adults, when they get into riding, they should sample a bit of everything.
Well, I think we're going to talk later on in some of the other episodes about the foundation of training of horses, but I think that's relevant for humans too, right? We should have a rounded knowledge before we specialise. There's probably some phrase or something in sports science and sports psychology about something before specialisation, I think that's very, very true. Okay, good. Do you think there are any fundamental issues with the horse world?
It's a difficult question.
Yes. It is.
Okay, so I think there are some issues in the horse world. I think there are there's issues with people not kind of accepting that life has moved on.
Okay.
You know, that like we were talking earlier about staffing and, you know, paying people and how you run a yard and things like that, that I think that needs looking at, you know, how people are treated in the industry.
Yeah.
I think, you know, and as well, people's knowledge of the horses as a general rule. I think I mean, we have a lot more information nowadays, so arguably we could say we're more knowledgeable nowadays than maybe 30 years ago. But, you know, 30 years ago, I think people knew a lot more about horses, you know.
That horsemanship that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, they knew a lot more, whereas I think nowadays people don't know as much. Not everybody, but, you know, there's a lot of people that don't.
Do you think there's an increase in, like you said, when you were a kid, every waking hour that you could was dedicated to the horses? The same as myself. I'd literally, you know, I mean, my parents were so annoyed that I'd risk my homework just so I can go see the horses, that extra minute or two.
Yeah.
Every second counted. Do you think there's an element of the more modern society now, like you say, those children and youth coming through are specialising at such a young age, that they're maybe not just spending the time around horses in general? Like, we don't have the riding club pony clubs, if you like, quite as much.
Yeah, but I mean, I think as well, though, I think that is, it's a lot harder nowadays because, you know, health and safety, insurances, you know, people love to sue people. You know, when I was a kid at the riding school, you know, well, as I say, it was more like a trekking centre. You know, we used to go out, I mean, in the summer holidays, we basically lived there, you know, and we would ride our bikes up there. We'd be there all day and take our trusty pot noodle and have that for lunch. And, you know, but we'd go for a ride in the morning, you know, we'd muck out the ponies, we'd groom them, we'd go for a ride in the morning, you know, we might ride in the afternoon, or, I mean, sometimes we'd just get them out and ride around bareback on them. You know, we used to go like round and round the barns in the farm, you know, and just muck around with the horses. So you just sort of, it was just kind of what you did. Obviously they can't, a lot of people, they can't do that now. You know, insurance wouldn't let them. But to be fair, it probably didn't then, but nobody really cared. So
that was the day.
That was, you know, back in the day. Jesus, I sound old. But, you know, but it's true. You know, I think, you know, we're not as carefree as we used to be.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, I mean, what are your hopes for the future? I guess for yourself and for the horse world. I know you want to focus on the horse world, but
I would say, well, for myself, I would say I want to just keep enjoying training my horses. I'm, you know, obviously I've limited myself in terms of my numbers now, but, you know, I've got some nice horses. I want to be, you know, competing them at a top level. Still enjoying the sport, still enjoying riding and training.
Without having quite so much burnout and stress.
Yes, indeed. And I think for the horse world in general, I hope that people don't get fed up of it and leave. I think there's a bit of that going on, that people get fed up of the industry and leave. And I think that's a great shame. So I hope that people keep going and they do want to, you know, keep improving it. So that there is a sport, you know, there is a horse world. Because it is such a niche sport. It is. It is. I mean, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's any other Olympic sport that actually takes two biological beings and they have to work in a partnership with one another. No, I don't think so.
So, you know, what I mean by that is we're such a small group, really, you know.
I mean,
we should be looking after one another.
Yeah, and I think we're very good at getting a bit carried away with, you know, the horse industry and how it's this sort of big thing, and it is, but actually in the grand scheme of things, we are a minority, but we are good at it. You know, I mean, the Olympic teams have been fantastic. You know, I mean, Team GB's won a lot of medals in all the disciplines.
Yeah.
So it feels as though, you know, we need to try and keep going with that, but you know, there has to be the sport to do that, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good future, and I hope that's one of my hopes too, is that we can keep it alive for as long as we can.
We'll find that out next time, because next time George is in the hot seat, so I'm going to interrogate her, which I will enjoy very much.
Okay, well, thank you for listening to us drum along.
Indeed.
But we shall see you for sure, because I got told off last time for saying maybe we'll see you next
indeed.
time.
Yeah, it's not a maybe. We will see you next time.
We will.
And we hope we aren't boring you. And if you do want to get in touch, by all means, contact us through all our social media platforms and our email, which is talkthehindlegoffahorse@gmail.com.
It is, indeed. For now, bye-bye.
See you later.